Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast. I'm Ollie Barrett in London and these are the top headlines this hour. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov claims Moscow is trying to free Ukraine from oppression as Russian forces approach Kyiv on the second day of the Kremlin's invasion. Ukrainian President Zelensky says continued Russian aggression against his country shows that sanctions imposed on Moscow by the West are not enough.
Our assessment as of this morning is that Russia has not taken any of its major objectives. In fact, it is behind its hoped-for timetable. They've lost over 450 personnel.
The UK Defence Secretary says Russia has lost over 450 personnel in its invasion so far, as we were just hearing there. The United Nations condemns the arrest of reportedly more than 1,800 people in Russia for protesting against the country's invasion of Ukraine. And Europe's major stock markets attempt to rebound after slumping as Russia invaded Ukraine. Ukraine says Russian forces are approaching its capital Kyiv from the north and northeastern sides. On day two of Vladimir Putin's invasion of the country, we're seeing missiles pounding Kyiv and reports of gun battles there as well. Ukraine's foreign minister has tweeted to say that horrific Russian strikes are being conducted on the capital and has again called on the world to stop Vladimir Putin. Russia has reportedly captured the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, and it's thought that some Russian military have massed in the Chernobyl exclusion zone. In a midnight address, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky warned his citizens about Russian sabotage groups in the capital and urged residents to be vigilant and observe curfew rules.
Але є й друге. Ми залишаємось наодинці у захисті нашої держави. Хто готовий воювати разом з нами? Чесно, не бачу таких. Хто готовий дати Україні гарантію вступу до НАТО? Чесно, всі бояться.
Across Ukraine, at least 137 people have been killed in the first day of fighting. President Zelensky has called up conscripts and reservists countrywide in a general mobilization. At least 100,000 people have already been displaced as Russian missiles and shelling rains down on Ukrainian cities. The first Ukraine refugees have begun crossing into Hungary and Romania. And we can talk now to Alexander Krebet, who is international desk editor at the ZN.UA newspaper in Ukraine. And Alexander, I believe you're in Kyiv itself. What is the situation where you are right now? What are you seeing and what are you hearing?
Hi, I do hear yes, I'm in Kyiv and I do hear the sirens sometimes. Now it's silent. But also the shellings from, I don't know which direction, it's so bit strange sound and from different sides. So that's I see and hear.
And do you mind me asking, what is your intention? Will you stay in Kyiv?
Yeah, I'm staying in Kyiv, absolutely.
What is the mood in the city, given those warnings that we've been hearing from officials about Russian forces approaching?
Since the very morning, I saw over the window, my own window in the block I live in, I saw the people with the luggages, suitcases, backpacks, like packed with all their stuff, and they were trying to I don't know, to relocate somewhere. But a lot of people are also staying, like they are walking, they preparing, they buying food and something. Like they are prepared to wait and to resist the aggression.
We've seen Western countries announcing another raft of sanctions against Russia. Ukrainian President Zelensky saying that that's not necessarily going to be enough. What would Ukrainians like to see Western countries do?
Support providing us with the anti-aircraft missiles, closing the sky above Ukraine. Yeah, and imposing maximum sanctions on Putin, on all the Russian elites, the Russian banks, Russian gas, Russian oil, Russian everything, until they stop.
The Russians are claiming, of course, that they don't intend to occupy Ukraine. What do you and other Ukrainians that you're talking to feel about Russian intentions? What do you think the Russian plan is here?
This is not true. This is not true. Russia wants the whole Ukraine, and this is the occupation operation. What they are just talking in the Kremlin, in the Russian foreign ministry, it's just not true. This is a lie.
And Alexander, finally, what emotions are you feeling at the moment?
I'm trying to be calm, really. Like that's the biggest struggle, let's say. Like trying to be calm. And I think I'm succeeding it.
Alexander Krebet, thank you very much indeed. Do stay safe.
Thank you.
The West has promised the Russian president will be held accountable for his actions and has confirmed a new round of sanctions aimed at crippling the Russian economy.
Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences.
U.S. President Joe Biden unveiled harsh new sanctions against Russia on Thursday after Moscow launched an all-out invasion of Ukraine, imposing measures to impede Russia's ability to do business in the global economy.
We've now sanctioned Russian banks that together hold around $1 trillion in assets. We've cut off Russia's largest bank, a bank that holds more than 1/3 of Russia's banking assets by itself, cut it off from the U.S. financial system. And today, we're also blocking 4 more major banks. That means every asset they have in America will be frozen.
Biden said the sanctions were designed to have a long-term impact on Russia and to minimize the impact on the United States and its allies. And he said Washington was prepared to do more.
This is going to take time, and we have to show resolve so he knows what's coming. And so the people of Russia know what he's brought on them. That's what this is all about.
His announcement represented the second major tranche of sanctions against Russia, and Biden warned personally sanctioning Russian President Vladimir Putin was still an option.
These powers will enable us.
Adding to the latest round of Western penalties, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson unveiled new measures targeting banks, members of Putin's inner circle, and the very wealthy who enjoy high-rolling London lifestyles to, quote, maximize the economic price Putin will pay. Adding Putin will be condemned by history.
Now we see him for what he is, a blood-stained aggressor who believes in imperial conquest.
What wasn't part of Thursday's tranche of sanctions, cutting off Russia from SWIFT, the interbank messaging network that is the backbone of international finance.
The sanctions that we have proposed on all their banks are of equal consequence, maybe more consequence than SWIFT number 1. Number two, it is always an option, but right now that's not the position that the rest of Europe wishes to take.
Describing Thursday's onslaught as a dangerous moment for Europe, Biden said he authorized troops that have been placed on standby to deploy to Germany to defend NATO allies, stressing that Putin's actions have made him a pariah on the international stage.
Putin's aggression against Ukraine will end up costing Russia dearly, economically and strategically. We will make sure of that.
Well, our correspondent Ross Cullen has sent us this report from Paris.
We have confirmation that the European Champions League final, so the showpiece event for European club soccer, is going to be held in Paris this year. It was meant to be held in St. Petersburg, but FIFA and UEFA have been acting to try to strip Russia's second city of its chance to host the showpiece event by moving it to Paris in response to what we see as the sporting world's response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Also further complications because there are World Cup qualifiers still to be played involving Russia, Ukraine and other European nations like Poland and Scotland as well, coming up for the World Cup in later this year in November in Qatar. So the sporting world is still trying to come to terms with how they can ensure the safety of players, fans and officials, and how they can maybe react to show that they are also standing up to Russian aggression. So just a word to start with, breaking news. This city, Paris, is going to be hosting this year's Champions League final for the men's tournament, meant to be held in St. Petersburg, Russia's second city. That has been stripped now from Russia and is going to be awarded instead to France, with Paris hosting that. Talking of the overall French response, you mentioned Jean-Yves Le Drian in the introduction. The French foreign minister has said that he believes the safety and security of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky could be at risk, and France stands ready to help the president if needs be. But the president has said he will remain in Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital, for the time being, to try to show that the government can continue in Ukraine in the face of this Russian aggression, this Russian invasion. And you mentioned the sanctions as well. Another overnight mammoth summit, emergency council meeting of all the 27 European Union leaders, and they agreed to a sanctions package of $1.3 billion in support from the EU to Ukraine to go with trying to hit Russia in the transport sector, energy sector, in terms of visas, exports, and also a finance with trying to shut Russia off from as much of the global financial system as possible. Stated aim of the French Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire. He is convening European Union finance ministers right now in Paris to try to ensure accord between all the 27 different nations on the financial aspect of the sanctions. This is the second sanctions package. Remember, the first one was announced here in Paris 3 days ago when we had the first Russian aggression, the independence recognition of those two eastern Ukrainian states. And now the latest from the European Union is this second sanctions package.
In Russia, people have come out onto the streets in protest against the invasion of Ukraine, leading to hundreds of arrests. Russian police have reportedly detained over 1,700 people at anti-war demonstrations in cities across the country. And bear in mind, they did so after the Russian president had warned citizens of the legal repercussions of anti-war protests. And we've been speaking to Jason Beardsley, the National Executive Director from the Association of the US Navy, to get his take on the escalating crisis in Ukraine.
The Russian attack looks like It's decapitating, one, the political structure, the military structure. And of course, I think Putin has tilted his hand and said he's looking to take control of logistics routes, transportation hubs, airfields, in order for them, the Russian military, to really survive in the next days, weeks, months to come. They're going to need to move a lot of material, people, blood supplies, food into the entire area. So that's why what you're seeing is the targeted strikes against hard facilities, military facilities, and again, political, because it looks like what Vladimir Putin is saying is he wants to establish a pro-Putin government in Ukraine, and he's willing to put all risk on the table to get to that. Russia will take nominal control with conventional forces of the ground, but here's where it gets problematic. The longer their forces are there, extended lines of communication and support allow for insurgents, guerrilla warfare, irregular warfare to continually harass and interdict the Russians who are exposed throughout the Ukrainian territory. It's one of the reasons you're seeing a limit to the loss of lives. You mentioned about 130, 140 or so. We would be in the thousands if this was a full-scale bloody invasion. What I think Vladimir Putin is saying or suggesting with his tactics is that he intends to control the country, and he is not looking for a long, irregular warfare fight with the locals, which I think he'll establish in the eastern province, Luhansk and Donetsk. He'll be looking for nominal control in the western province. What that means is a pro-Putin friendly president, so Zelensky out, and a pro-Putin puppet in the government. That's what he's done in Crimea. It's what he did in Belarus. This is what he's done in Kazakhstan recently, and then in Georgia back in 2008, 2009. So this is a pretty standard fair play, apart from the fact that this is one of the larger scale invasions we've seen from Putin. It suggests that he's willing to go all the way.
Thousands of Ukrainians are now trying to flee the country, making attempts to leave by car and rail.
Desperate Ukrainians are fleeing the Russian invasion, flooding highways, trains and bus stations. And Europe is bracing for an influx. That of thousands of Ukrainian refugees. Beelines of cars rushed out of Kyiv. This shortly before Russia began bombing civilian areas in the Ukrainian capital. Russian troops are now inching closer to Kyiv.
I'm from Lviv. The mood is patriotic. I'll take my children away and return. We will fight this off. Ukraine will win no matter what.
In the meantime, the United Nations has called on European countries. This to keep their borders open for the displaced Ukrainians. According to the UN Refugee Agency, around 100,000 people have already fled within Ukraine. Thousands more have taken shelter. Where? In neighbouring Poland and Hungary. Meanwhile, Poland's border is opening 9 reception centres, offering meals and medical care to the Ukrainian refugees. This train arrived in the Polish town of Przemyśl on Thursday. Hundreds of passengers on board from eastern Ukraine's Kharkiv. Some 15,000 Ukrainians have already crossed over to Poland since the invasion, a figure quoted by border authorities.
We've actually been very lucky to get out of Ukraine with the second to last train that was coming here. We've spent the last 16 hours using all of our luck coming here. Many people, many of our friends will get refugee status, but we are fortunate enough to have our accommodation planned. And we are very happy that we have our friends in Poland that are ready to help our people.
Meanwhile, Kharkiv was rocked by explosions. Smoke billowing from buildings. The panic is palpable at the Luzhanka border crossing. It connects Hungary with Ukraine, currently packed with hundreds of cars. Hungarian authorities are sending troops to the border. This to deal with the refugee influx. Sounds of sirens and missiles resonated all day across Ukrainian cities. Residents scrambled to take shelter in underground subway stations. Meanwhile, in the strategic port city of Mariupol, houses were on fire and buildings were damaged. Russian troops launched extensive missile attacks across the city. A massive upsurge of attacks was seen in the Donbas region. The territory is now controlled by Russian-backed separatists. Multiple buildings destroyed and dozens of lives lost. Residents are now ramping up efforts to evacuate the region.
In around 3 minutes, another one came here, right into the factory workshop, and those people were hit who didn't have time to hide.
As many as 5 million Ukrainians could be displaced. This, according to Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield. She is the US representative to the United Nations. For Europeans, the massive humanitarian crisis could be the greatest since World War II. Are the United States and its allies prepared?
The Russian military has begun a brutal assault on the people of Ukraine.
Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Well, events are obviously moving very quickly in Ukraine. Do stay tuned to WION for all of the latest developments from the region, but also around the world as the international community reacts to unfolding events. Thanks very much as ever for watching. I'm Ollie Barrett. World is One.
This is right, Arab.